Hello, welcome back everyone to another episode of The Heart of the Cast. I'm Farfa once again. Joined with me is
Josh, hello.
there he is. Today is trying to make sure we maintain the our incredible track record of good feedback, and I think we've been keeping on top of making sure that we've had a growing community around the Heart of the Cast and taking on all the suggestions. And one thing, of course, was sometimes these can get aged a little like milk. So last episode was
That's my bad though. The last one,
yeah, if it
yes.
was like 2 days earlier, which is when it should have been, it might have been okay. But yeah, we were
Look,
coping hard.
I was busy watching a YCS the entire weekend, so I missed the upload on the podcast, and then it came out too late, and then the things we said aged very poorly because it was recorded before the YCS but came out after. My bad.
We did get two melodious tops, so I think overall it ended up actually being somewhat accurate, right?
Yeah, it's just like the whole discussion of is Snake Eye tier 0 kind of was obsolete after it took 23 top cut spots out of 32.
I think
But
it was like 25 if you include the quote unquote cash tira and like a Fire King list or something. It was absurd. It was one of the most we've had in a while. I think the last big results was like Necros level, Spiral, tier of course, obviously the big one. Yeah,
only
there's
Zodiac had
it's
the same numbers, but like it's definitely very much up there.
yeah.
I don't know. Actually, something I probably should have looked up, but is it was it higher before the ban list even, or has it gone up?
I think it's gone up, right? Because I feel like the ban list, like, because that's
I
one
was
thing people were
afraid.
criticizing about
Yeah,
the ban list was like, oh well, clearly Savage and Baron aren't the problem cards, and it's like,
yeah.
well, yeah, like I think they're still problem cards, but I don't think banning them was ever going to hit Snake Eye. I'm pretty sure we all were under that impression.
It's gone up. That's crazy. Well, yeah, but that's
uh,
not what we're yapping about today because I feel like we've yapped about that enough already, and I feel like everyone has already voiced their opinions on how terrible Snake Eye is, and so on and so forth. So
yeah.
yeah, we're gonna talk about a little bit something different today, which is something I've been wanting to do for a long time because I'm personally a big fan of Time Wizard formats, and we're gonna be talking through the history of the game a little bit, talking through different periods of Yu-Gi-Oh's long history at this point. And since I've played for the majority of it, and at this point, you started a little bit after I started, but you still have like a experienced definitely the majority of this game's history. I think at this point, because when did you start? Like 2012 ish,
2013, which is really funny
13.
to think about because if you started in 2013, it's like, oh, you don't even know. But now today, it's like it's gone so far past the point where it is now a majority. You know, when people like
Yeah,
hit you with the crazy uh technical truth that the 80s are closer to us that in 2000 than 2000 is to us in 2024. So that's terrifying to think.
yeah, because I'm looking at this overview on a page called formatlibrary.com that has like all these formats listed, all these retro formats listed. And 2013 is like you've experienced roughly, I would say, like 55-60% of this game's history at this point, even though it sounds like you started super late, but it's just been that long.
Yeah, because I started at the beginning of modern format. Am I right?
Okay,
But
no.
definitely, definitely one of
Look,
the newest
Dragon,
chapters of the game
there's
was
no
Dragon
way.
Ruler.
I don't want to get into this discussion, but you leave me no choice but to say this. But like, there's no way you think Dragon Ruler is a modern Yu-Gi-Oh deck.
If we want to get into like sociological like terminology here, we could probably call it
We
modern, and
we
like
do
Master
not
Rule
want
4
to
is
get
like,
into that.
and then we could have like postmodern, right? Like that's kind of where we're at right now. You know, we've got Zodiac as the avant-garde format,
Post
something like
modern.
that.
Okay, which one's Renaissance?
Pepe, right? Has to be.
Pepe's the Renaissance. Oh
Yes,
my
fixing the
god.
game with Perform Age Plush Fire.
And so, what is Adamancipator? Baroque? Get it?
Adamantipator is just Golden Age, right?
Golden Age.
Hal Klinkross? What do you think? The Dark Ages.
The Dark Ages. The Plague.
Are we supposed to talk about other stuff at the start, by the way?
I mean, if you have a topic, bring it up. Feel free to.
I've been playing a lot of Elden Ring recently. It's a fun game. It feels a lot like Yu-Gi-Oh in some ways when it
How's
frustrates
the meta
you.
like in Elden Ring?
Yeah, it's an RPG, so I mean you can kind of play whatever you want. I've been having a lot of fun with it. It's difficult, it's frustrating, but it's really enjoyable. It's really weird because like this is my job, and I genuinely don't really actually play much anything other than Yu-Gi-Oh. So it's strange to go to a whole other genre of game.
I saw you stream like Variety the one day, but have you been playing it more off stream, or is it mostly?
Yeah, I've been trying to. No, I try and only play on stream. I just
Okay.
do like about 30 minutes or an hour after my regular content these days, just to. I'm trying to like weave that in a little bit more, you know.
That sounds fun.
Yeah.
I've been.
Do you play anything outside of Yu-Gi-Oh?
People have been asking me recently to try different stuff. Maybe it's because they're tired of seeing Snake Eyes as well, but like people have been suggesting like Slay the Spire or something like that. I haven't tried any of those yet, but
I think Balatro. I tried that. That was really fun. I think you'd be really good at that.
Oh yeah, I saw you do that. I think it's when I hosted you like a couple days ago when you did. That was the day you did the variety stuff. I think I came in when you played Balatro. I've only seen people play it for like, I mean, combined like 20 minutes maybe. So I don't know exactly what's going on there, but it has cards, so I'd probably find it fun.
Well, it's following poker rules, like 3 of a kind, full house. Which, by the way, I only know what a full house is because of Yu-Gi-Oh. Like the 2 face-ups and 3. I swear to God, it's like I wish I was lying. But if you know that stuff, it's like easy to jump into. But for me, I don't play poker. I've played poker like once for fun with friends, like literally 10 years ago. So I have no idea like what the pairs are. So I had to learn that in the process of learning the game mechanics. But it's really enjoyable. So if you know it, like I think you would probably have a great time. I would recommend it.
I've been thinking about doing some variety on stream at some point. If people are into it, I might try it.
I'm telling you, I'm still waiting for the Josh subathon this year. And man, if we get Josh playing Valorant, I would just die. I want to see that so much.
It might happen. It might not
Josh
happen.
playing Valorant. How's it gonna feel going from like Master 1 to like Iron in an FPS game?
I mean, if I play any of those kind of games, I'm gonna suck. I'll tell you that. I'm not ranking up a single time.
Among Us, we've had like a couple of Among Us lobbies over the years. It's definitely something.
Yeah, but when we played Among Us, I didn't stream yet. I think that was on your stream.
I think you were just starting out.
When was Among Us at this point?
I think Josh was averaging like 300-400 viewers. You know, back in the small man days. You know, little streamer Josh. Here, look at him now.
Your favorite Among Us retro format? 2022?
My favorite Among Us format? Anything with Triff, I guess.
Wait, you played Among Us with Triff?
I feel like you were in that lobby, no?
I've never played Among Us with Triff. I would remember that.
Oh, okay. I definitely did one lobby with Triff and Sam. Oh my god, it was just
that sounds like
ridiculous.
The best time ever. That does sound insane. I would pay to be in a lobby with Sam and Triff after like I don't know. Sam has killed someone in Among Us and Triff has seen it. And they're
imagine the argument.
Dude.
Speaking of, we have been lining up a couple of future guests, if you're all wondering, because we're trying to like throw in relevant, guests onto the stream where we're.
This was very funny yesterday from my perspective, by the way, because there's been like 10 different chats popping up on my Discord of like, hey, join our podcast. When are you going to be on our podcast? And it's just been Farfa messaging, like making group chats with 10 different people. And it's like from their end, it looks normal because they just receive one message. On my end, it's just like message after message after message.
Yeah, it's a little sneak peek. We're gonna have a little sit down with Syriax Monday. I don't actually have a topic for him, but I guess it would just be good to have him on regardless because
we should have brought on Syriax and Rhymecell at the same time. Have you ever seen them together? It's glorious.
Have you seen them and Sam together? That's something. Josh Bavarnik is he head judged Worlds. He's like the man for rulings and tournament policy. So that's going to be a really um, good topic as well at some point over the next couple of weeks. Hard leg, probably for rogue decks at some point. We're gonna have a rogue discussion podcast. So we've got like a lot of people lined up. It's gonna be pretty fun. So I think yeah, just stay tuned to the podcast and keep subscribed on the YouTube or Spotify, whatever your preferred medium of listening to this is. We're gonna have lots of cool guests on over the course of this next month, especially with like we're gonna do like a Yu-Gi-Oh, a current format dedicated podcast or two, probably in the lead up to nationals. But the reality is like the game feels very dead right now. Up until
Okay,
like, you know,
I mean,
in terms of like discussion topics, right? I don't think there's much to
I mean,
really add.
I know that you personally have a burning hatred for Tier 0 Snake Eyes format. So I thought about like doing after German and UK nationals, I thought about doing like a roundup, but then I thought to myself, you know, the roundup from that would probably look like the same thing that we've done last week. So we're gonna try to get through this Snake Eye period of with doing some other different interesting to talk about, like topics that basically are timeless.
Yeah,
and then we're
exactly.
gonna return to current TCG discussions as soon as something shakes it up. Like I'm assuming at the very
Yeah, so
minimum, we're gonna do an Infinite Forbidden discussion like we did with Legacy of Destruction. So that's not that too far away. Or maybe even
yeah.
the upcoming Battles of Legends Terminal Revenge kind of thing, which is bringing some new life, hopefully. So we're gonna talk about that eventually as well. Maybe we can combine those two into one, like discussing Terminal Revenge and Infinite Forbidden or something like that. But yes.
Yeah, so I think getting some guests on to split up the discussions over the course of this summer should be quite productive. Keep things fresh as well, because there's only so much you can say about OSS special Ash and blah blah blah, etc. etc. So yeah, we'll keep going there.
Yes.
All right, let's jump into chapter 1, year 1, generation 1.
Yeah, so I've just, in terms of our overlays, I've just divided it into the years because, like I said, on Format Library, they actually divide every single year into different sections of like different ban lists or important releases. So if we really wanted to, but I'm afraid that would be way too long. There are, I counted it just now, it's 103 different formats that they've divided Yu-Gi-Oh's history into. And we're not going to be able to discuss 103 different formats in a single podcast. But like the goal or my idea with this whole, you know, recap of Yu-Gi-Oh's history was to try and find certain periods in the history of the game that we really liked or maybe didn't like, and maybe put some focus on certain retro formats that we think have potential. Because obviously currently there's this huge boom in like Edison Time Wizard tournaments going on, which is really cool. We're going to talk about Edison, of course, and like people know GOAT. But I feel like currently when you talk Time Wizard, it is mostly Edison and GOAT, right? And that feels like an underrepresentation to me. I feel like there has to be more, and I know there's more because I've played for the majority of this. I know there's more formats out there that deserve probably a lot more recognition when it comes to playing Time Wizard Yu-Gi-Oh!
If you really want to, like, there's again just so much depth to the game. Historically, you could do like an entire podcast for every single one of these formats because of how much there is in terms of the card pool, the
Yeah.
deck building, the counters and
Yeah.
stuff. Which
Yeah,
is,
and
I think,
yeah.
like, which is like I think really interesting as an idea of because I wanted to bring this up, like this thought experiment at the very beginning, just before we jumped into all of the years.
Mhm.
Have you ever heard of the suggestion of like rebooting Yu-Gi-Oh?
Just like starting over.
Yeah, like maybe some sort of like alternative format that just restarts from the first set. Maybe you would speed it up a little bit, so you'd combine a bunch of products and combine a bunch
Would
of
you
sets,
like
but something
change
like
the
that.
sets? Or is it like, so you're talking progression series?
Essentially, yeah, like a literal like progression format of sorts.
So they make a secondary format that has the same releases as Yu-Gi-Oh did.
Well,
But
maybe
like,
not exactly. Don't think too hard about like the specifics, but
okay,
just
okay,
like
okay.
the general concept of like, you know, a sort of like restart.
So it's like an IRL progression series, basically.
Yeah, maybe.
I mean, I'd take part in it occasionally if I had time. But to me that just feels like basically playing Time Wizard events, but like they progress in their
Yeah, basically.
yeah
Like if there was like an amount of dedicated uh, allocation of prizing, funding,
hmm
player interest into like an alternative format to actually restart the game.
yeah
You could, because I don't know how you feel. Like whenever I go back and I look at like some of my old deck lists, or some of just like the
yeah
topping deck lists of like 10 years ago, I'm just like, how did this garbage top? Like, why did I think this was good? So it would be really interesting to see people try and like rebuild those because even like
yeah
Edison, for example, like
hmm
people go back and they realize, wait a minute, like the actual OG Edison deck wasn't actually that good, right? Like,
yeah.
so
Well,
it's kind
like
of interesting.
the problem with that, what you suggested, is that the stuff that you like, let's say you have a format you really like or you want to experiment in your thought experiment, that would also not last that long, right? It would just have another release come out and then it changes again.
Yeah.
Because in an ideal world, it's there's just like an ability for everyone to play every retro format. Like it's just there's not enough people or not enough support for each of these individual formats. Because like, but in an ideal world, you go to a YCS, if these existed, and then you'd be able to sign up not only for an Edison public event or a Goat public event, but if that's the one you cared the most for, you could sign up for Teledad or Perfect Circle or Meadowlands, Fire Water, something like those, right? Like that'd be the ideal world. Is like there's enough interest and enough
What
opportunities
is
to play.
Meadowlands, by the way? I've heard people
Meadowlands
mention that a
is
few times.
I think 2014 Fire Water.
That's insane. Like 10 years on, that was one of the formats I actually played the most when I first
Yeah.
started, and I've never heard that name before. It's really funny, like just the
It's named after,
revisionism
I
that
think
people
there's
have.
this, it's basically like Edison. It's named because of YCS Meadowlands, which is the one that Tyree Tinsley won with Mermail.
Right. When I hear Meadowlands, I think of some Elden Ring zone or something like the Meadowlands. Like what? Is
No,
that a
that's
real
just in
place?
the USA
Okay.
apparently.
Oh, okay.
It's
In the
not an Elden
USA.
Ring stage.
All right. Okay. Shall we?
2013, not 2014. Yeah, my bad. I didn't know exactly which year it was because there's multiple instances where Mermail is like a thing. So yeah,
All right. Shall we jump in?
let us jump in to the year 2002, which I think is the year that I want to talk about the least, probably because I have you've played LOB format with Brad, right?
Yeah, it's miserable. It's like
It's
the
so bad. How did this game ever take off? Like,
the 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 meta is like 2000 walls, like setting Mystic Elf and Giant Soldier of Stone. Like they're actually just so impossible to like get over.
yeah.
It's a terrible It's like really good to learn the fundamentals and basics of the game, I think.
I
But
guess, yeah. But like,
basically,
I mean, you're learning very limited basics. You're learning what a normal summon is, what a spell card is,
yeah.
and what a trap card is. And even you have to be lucky to learn what a trap card is because there's like two good ones or something. It's like Trap Hole, and maybe that's the only one. I don't even know.
And there's an interesting meta of setting cards because it isn't just like, oh, that set card is a trap card, because
Yeah,
you have cards, monsters called Trap Master is pretty popular.
yeah,
So you can flip Trap Master and then pick a back row and then pop it if it's a trap.
mhm,
So you can set a spell instead to bait Trap Master.
yeah,
However, you also need to consider D spell, which is
yes.
MST, but it checks if it's a spell first. Then it destroys it.
I
And
think
it's spell
people
speed
also play
1.
Vaboku as well. Like
Yeah,
that's
there's
like the thing.
Wabico
And there's
reinforcement,
this whole
sometimes
meta
Castle
of
Walls.
like the best. I think the best or like the biggest speed stick that's like viable in that format is like Summon Skull, and then there's this meta of I don't want to normal summon or tribute summon my Summon Skull because it gets destroyed by Trap Hole, so I'm gonna tribute set it, and then I think Trap Hole can't hit
Ooh,
flips.
I've never seen that play before, actually.
Yeah, that's the extent of
Yeah.
how interesting it gets. Like it really doesn't have that much stuff going on for it because it's mostly vanillas, some
Hmm.
some effect monsters, but there's really not that much depth. Like it was fun when I played it for the first or second time with Brad, but then it stops
It's
being fun.
it's very bare bones Yu-Gi-Oh. Yeah, it's like you've tech cards like what's that stupid mask card? Mask of Darkness, is it, that adds a trap from your grave?
Mask of Darkness. That's Mask of Darkness.
Yeah, and I think there's like Armored Ninja, which and Man-Eater Bug is in the format as well.
Oh
So
yeah, right.
unironically, it's like a really good format to like teach someone Yu-Gi-Oh, I think. Like you're learning like how setting works, you're learning how flipping works, activating spells and spell speeds. It's like decent to like learn the
I guess
simple stuff.
if someone has a lot of time on their hands, the best way to teach them Yu-Gi-Oh would be to like walk them through different Time Wizard formats, right? Like first thing you do is you play a couple games of LOB format. Then you play, I don't know. Then the next step is like you teach them like some extra deck with like fusions in like Goat format, and then you teach them like an early Synchro format era thingy. Then you do an early Xyz format, and then eventually
Yeah.
they'll understand it all. I don't know. Never tried
Yeah.
that.
Just start from scratch and progress through.
Basically, just
But if you're
burn
an
them.
experienced player, again, we don't want to spend too much time on some of these, but like,
Yeah.
holy, like, if you're an do not play this format. It is miserable. It is actually miserable when you min max this. Like, Exodia is like a legitimate deck because of just how easy it is to sit on a 2000 wall. It is so bad. It's hard to out defense position monsters.
Yeah.
Summoning big guys is like kind of annoying because you could run into a wall of illusion, which is just at the end of the damage step, just bounce the thing that attack this. It's
Yeah.
oh god, it's so boring. Like deck out is like a very like consistent part of the game. It's terrible. Anyway,
It's like if you've ever, and we're gonna talk about Goat in a second, of course, but I even developed this feeling towards Goat eventually that I felt like it was too slow and a little bit boring. It's still fun to play every once in a while, but holy shit, 2002, 2003, and maybe even 2004. I haven't specifically played 2004. Those feel very, very slow. It's like, yeah.
I don't know much about like pre-Go,
Mhm.
post-Yugi Kaiba deck. Like, what is there? There was like a hand control
It's
or
just
like
basically taking that format from 2002 and slowly adding completely busted spells and effect monsters into it, because it's like when you imagine a world where people play La Jin, Summon Skull, and Vaboku and all that, it's like anything that has a somewhat solid effect would be considered really, really strong. So they could have probably like just added solid spells and traps into the game or effect monsters. Instead, they added the most busted cards, like still until this date, right? Like they add stuff like instead of adding like a good old I don't know, like they added some cards like Mystical Space Typhoon and Fissure and Smashing Ground or whatever, but like for the most part, it's like, well, here's Painful Choice, here's Graceful Charity, here's Imperial Order, here's Delinquent Duo, here's the
okay,
Forceful
low key
Sentry.
though. Yeah, I mean those are obviously insane. But low key though, Painful Choice kind of sucks until like grave effects. No,
It did, yes. In the beginning, Painful Choice was not even that good.
Which is crazy to think, like, dude, I love watching like traditional tier limit where you go like Painful Choice, reveal 3 names, Sulik, and like tier cash. This is so good.
Yeah, the thing behind Painful Choice was it was like meant to be an actual painful choice for when you use it, because it's like you're gonna get one of those cards, but you're gonna lose the others forever. In modern or like nowadays, it would be considered a painful choice for the opponent because he's gonna die regardless of what he picks. Yeah.
Can I just say, like, it's I like the concept of that card because it really it takes that split of old and new Yu-Gi-Oh to like an extreme. Because in old Yu-Gi-Oh, it's a painful choice for the player because you're losing those cards that you could draw.
Yeah.
But you don't think about that anymore in recent Yu-Gi-Oh, right? Like I've never really thought that often about like, you know, over the next like couple of turns I need to like draw this or something, like unless it's like very rare card games. But in old Yu-Gi-Oh, it's like a thing. Like you want resources, you want these power cards, you don't want to get rid of them, right? So it's a huge divide, I think.
But yeah, there's I really don't. The other thing why I don't want to talk about these first 2 or 3 years in too much detail is because I can't add too much to that discussion, because those were the ones where I was still like what 2002. I was like 7 years old, so I haven't I didn't play those
You didn't
formats
write
at
this
the time.
down at the time? Like you didn't take notes? Like
I did not take notes. No, I was playing. I was playing my Exodia deck at the school playground. For the first
did you
couple
have
years of.
Exodia? Wasn't that shit like expensive?
I wouldn't know if it was expensive or not. I don't know. I remember I brought Exodia to my first locals, which was probably around 2005 or six ish.
Hmm.
So I must have had it, but I think it's got like Dark Beginning reprints at that point already, like common.
Oh yeah, Dark Beginning, God.
I think they had common arms and legs, so it probably wasn't that crazy.
Say that out of context. Should we just jump to GOAT format, I think, now?
I think Goat is the first one we can actually talk about in a little
Okay.
bit more.
So I think GOAT format is one of the biggest like historical Time Wizard formats, and for the longest time until the recent rise of Edison. I think whenever people think of old Yu-Gi-Oh, maybe like 5 to 10 years ago, old Yu-Gi-Oh was like, oh, let's play some GOAT or something.
Yeah.
And even today, I think like Italy is like weirdly like the biggest region for Time Wizard GOAT,
Mm-hmm.
compared to like everywhere else, which I think a lot of other places kind of usually prefer Edison. But it's a huge format; people still really like it. And I think for any of you who have played GOAT, it's a really good format to just sit back and relax with friends and play back and forth
Mm-hmm.
really bit, because one of the fun things about Go, not really from a competitive standpoint, but I feel like one of the fun things is like you're constantly throwing bombs at each other, like turn after turn, because there's just so many busted like cards in that
Yep.
format. There's Pot of Greed, there's Graceful, you're hitting knock on like a big Magician of Faith, you're dropping Chaos Sork and stuff like that. Actually, is Sork in it, or is it just BLS?
Yeah, Sork's in it. Sork's at 3.
Yeah, Sork's in it. Yeah, so there's like just lots of these just powerful cards. So
Yep.
it's really fun, but competitively, I think it's not ideal. It's very sacky, I think, is the issue.
I would tend to agree. I think, well, I don't know if it's that sacky. It definitely has a lot of really important skill sets in it that I really, really like, and so on and so forth. Like I think Goat is cool. And from a skill level, sometimes it feels like you're being sacked. Like sometimes it feels like, okay, well, they've drawn Pot of Greed, they've drawn Graceful with their Sinister Serpent. Maybe they've Delinquent Duo'd a really important card out of my hand, and sometimes it gets even worse because if someone opens a card like Pot of Greed, it makes their Magician of Faith so much more powerful than yours, and if you don't have the out to the Magician of Faith, then it snowballs really fast. And maybe they can even protect it and flip it back down with the Tsukuyomi, which they're much more likely to have because they've drawn 4 cards of Pot of Greed, so on and so forth. And so, like, it can definitely snowball out of control. And then there's cards like the one of Black Luster Soldier, which is so good at like just killing you in a game that you are expecting to be super slow. But then suddenly that like the giant True Nades in the game, heavy storms in the game, the Black Luster Soldier comes down, you just die, you know, alongside other one-ofs like Snatch Steal, premature Burial, all that kind of stuff. So it's like it's meant to be slow, but then sometimes it's just weirdly not. So I kind of get what you're saying with like these one-ofs deciding, because like almost all of the things that people play in Goat are limited to some capacity. Like almost everything is limited, which is kind of weird. If you
Well,
think
that's the
about it
thing,
from
right? It's
today's
like if your
perspective.
deck has like 25 one-offs,
Yeah.
you can't really complain about getting sacked by the one-off because it's just
Well, I can
that's
and
what.
I will. And that the most recent Limit 1 festival in Master Duel has proven that.
Yeah. We went really hard during the Go event, and I built like I think like upwards of like 10 decks. There's like weirdly a lot of like viable decks to play. Like you can play
Mm-hmm.
like Pure Gravekeeper. There's like Warriors. There's Beasts. There's just Goat, stuff like that. Did you ever play like any of the OTK decks?
When I built a goat deck for the very first time, which was probably in like 20, I think around 2013 is when I started first building a goat deck in paper. I eventually built like this reasoning monster gate, sacred crane, dark magician of chaos kind of,
Yeah, Sacred
that kind of
Crane.
stuff. And it's very very wacky, but it's very fun.
Yeah, it's a cool format in some ways to visit. But I think like playing like historically and maybe playing like big Time Wizard events with it would
Mhm.
could feel a little bit frustrating, I think.
Yeah, so TLDR on my opinion on Goat. I've played it, I like it. It's not my favorite retro format. If I could choose any retro format to play, there's definitely like I don't even know if it makes my top 10, like out of all the ones that we're gonna talk about today. That doesn't mean it's bad, but because it still feels very nostalgic to me, although not as nostalgic, and that's an important factor, right? Nostalgia. It's not as nostalgic to me as a lot of other formats that we're going to talk about, simply because at the time in 2005, I wasn't playing meta decks. Like, I wasn't playing Goat Control. Like, I played Goat Control for the first time in like 2013. And for some of these formats that are about to happen in the next couple of years that we're talking about, that's different, right? I started actually playing with those decks, or maybe even like maybe playing at locals, not maybe, I mean, during Teledad, I couldn't afford Teledad, but I was competing in that format against Teledad, so I remember it more than I remember Goat Control ever being a thing, for me personally.
Can I just make like a really funny anecdote here, by the way?
Of course.
I'm on Format Library right now, and
Yes.
what you can like pick a format. So you pick like Goat, for example,
Mhm.
and then it gives you like the option of like different decks, but it also has recent events. And it's just like these 14-year-old pictures of these guys from like fucking 2006. It's recent events with these lists. It's actually crazy.
Any names you recognize?
It doesn't have their names weirdly. It
Oh,
just
okay.
says it's just this pictures of these people. I don't recognize anyone here, but I mean, you
Okay.
can definitely see the 2000 style. There's like sideway like baseball caps. What do you call it? Like, yeah, just to the sides. Frosted tips on the hair. Like, damn, that's some 2000s right there. That's a Yu-Gi-Oh duelist from 2004. You know.
Nice.
All right. Anyway.
Yep. So
Um.
I think one big thing that we're talking about towards the end of 2005, which brings us away from Goat Control into a considerably faster period, which is crazy because if you think about it from today's perspective, the people in 2006 probably complained about the game getting too fast. They probably were there and they're like, yeah, I don't like how games now end on like turn 8 instead of turn 15. You know, that's a problem. We need to talk about that.
I
We
think it's
need to-
like it's funny, like the perspective, right? Like your perception
yes.
is different, right? Because like when you are in that time period and then
Mhm.
Konami releases Invasion of Chaos, you're just like, oh my god, what it like
Dude,
this is the
Invasion
biggest
of
power
Chaos.
spike, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah,
Um
that's 2000 I think 2004 or 3, but Invasion of Chaos is like crazy.
that
It's
was a
like,
meta shift.
yeah, that's what I meant earlier when I said like it was like La Jin, Summon Skull, and some other stuff, maybe a Jinzo here and there, and then they drop a Chaos Emperor Dragon Envoy of the End on that shit, and the Blackluster Soldier in the same set, and the Demok and Dimension
Yeah.
Fusion, all that in one set, and it's like that's crazy.
Yeah, just like think of that spike. Like put yourself in that time period and be like,
Yeah.
okay, right? Like what are they doing to the game?
Yeah. Yeah, and a similar thing, not quite as impactful, but like I think the end of the Goat format era is like the release of Cybernetic Revolution, which brings Cyber Dragon into the mix, right? Which is a huge speed up to how the game is being played, because suddenly it's like a 2100 beat stick available to swing the board in your favor. Tributes get a lot more viable with Cyber Dragon, which I mean, tribute monsters are already present here and there before the end of 2005 with like a one of Jinzo in like Goat Control decks, or like Parshath, or maybe Zabork here and there, Mobius in side decks. But like for Cyber Dragon is like what really gets off this whole like it picks
Have you
up the
ever
speed of the game notably.
have you ever looked at like online like archive discussions on like what was that old website like Metagame or something and
Mhm.
like Pojo? It's
Mhm.
so funny when you look at posts from like 20 years ago. There's
Yeah.
people talking about Cyber Dragon. I swear to God, you would think they were talking about Halka Fibrax. Like the level of like
That's
rage
what it
at
was
like the
like, right?
it's
That's the
in. I
thing.
know it's insane to think about, but Cyber Dragon was a huge power spike in the game as well because it
Yeah.
was a free beater. It was tribute fodder. It was just so strong.
I mean, it was bigger than anything you could normal summon at the time, realistically, right? Outside of like maybe a random Zombira Nurge. But like it was a free special summon and it was bigger than anything you could normal summon. So it was a very big deal. And it was a light monster, which does matter because we're entering this like period of time where most of the time you don't talk about like boss monsters in the sense of extra deck monsters like we do nowadays, right? Back in the day, boss monsters were very much stuff you had to put in your main deck, and the absolute best ones were either tribute monsters with which Cyber Dragon facilitated, or it was chaos monsters which Cyber Dragon also facilitated. Like we have like the BLS, the Chaos Emperor Dragon, which I think was banned already, but the BLS was still around, and then Chaos Sorcerer is also a very big deal, right? And so like Cyber Dragon lets you not only in itself put a big monster on the board, but it also facilitates putting even bigger monsters onto the board faster.
Yeah, good card.
So I think if you're like in that position where you find Goat enjoyable, but maybe it's a little bit too slow for your liking, I think you might want to look at like 2006. Although 2006 has a lot of these things where I think there's some individual cards that really, I don't want to say ruin that format, but I'm looking at the overview here on Format Library, and it's like there's a lot of crazy decks in that time period. Like Cyberstein is a card that, with the release of Cyber Twin Dragon alongside Cyber Dragon, just like Cyberstein's been legal ever since. Like it's legal in gold format and no one plays it really. But with the release of Cyber Twin and Cyber End Dragon and limiter removal being a thing, like it just makes killing people with Cyberstein so easy. And it's like something that maybe would have felt like a slightly upgraded version of GOAT format instead feels like just an OTK fiesta, because the defensive tools that people had did not match the offensive tools of like Cyberstein, True Nade, Heavy Storm, limiter removal, all that kind of stuff. Like we didn't have, you couldn't just sit on an Effect Veiler and be like, I'm fine if they Cyberstein, I'll Effect Veiler it. Oh yeah, Megamorph as well, like basically another version of limiter removal. Like it was just like, if they had Trunade and Stein, you died.
See, I know about these cards from GOAT format, weirdly enough, and I don't know if it's just like an OCG thing, but it's from the recent duel trial. I was playing like the that stupid like koala deck. You like Trunade, and then you like summon the koala with Stein, and then you Megamorph it, and then you Beast of the Land or something. And I'm looking at these deck lists, and it feels like, there's actually these decks look very similar. So yeah, it seems it's really degenerate as well, because back in that day, it's like, how are you stopping that, right? I think Solemn Judgment was like limited or something.
In GOAT, Solemn's at 3. I don't know if it already got hit in 2006. I don't think so.
Yeah,
but
I'm looking at some.
If like thing about Solemn in 2006 specifically is if everyone is trying to play Cyberstein, you obviously can't put.
Yeah, true.
You can't put Solemn in your deck, because after you Solemn your opponent's push, you can't have your own anymore.
I'm looking at some of these.
I think Cyber End Dragon also did piercing damage, right? So you can't even stop it from like chaining a Scapegoat, which was like one of the biggest defensive things you can do in GOAT format. Like in GOAT format, your opponent activates Giant Trunade, you activate Scapegoat, your opponent is pissed, right? Because they were trying to do something and you just said, no, you can't do it because I have 4 of these tokens, right? But like Cyber End is just 4,000 conveniently. You double that, it's 8,000. It kills you over a Scapegoat token, right? And that's a big deal to one of the best cards in GOAT format that wasn't limited or semi-limited. Like you could play 3 of that is your main defense option, and like it just ignores that.
We didn't really talk too much about burn, but I'm looking at some of these 2006 deck lists, and there's a lot of burn in top cut of some of these events.
Is it 2006?
Yeah, SJ San Jose 2006. There's like half the top 8 here looks like burn decks. Chain Burn as well, which I guess was a newer card at the time, quote unquote. But it's really funny because like so many of these cards haven't changed. Like there's still Just Desserts, Ojama Trio, Secret Barrel. Which begs the question in some way. I wonder why they never made burn into like a modern deck. Probably for a good reason, right? Like it would not be a very fun way to play the game.
This was attempted with like Trickstar, I guess. But I think it was just established relatively early on that sort of strategy is like, I don't know if people ever really like. I mean, I know that people liked playing it, but I don't know many people that liked playing against it back then. So maybe that's why. I don't know.
It's interesting. It's a whole different skill set to play against burn compared to like a conventional deck, isn't it?
That was always true. Yeah, that was a lot of the frustration I feel like that people had, at least back in the day, with decks like Chain Burn or regular burn, was because it was mostly very punishing if you didn't know what to do against it. But if you did know what to do against it, you had a much better like chance.
What's like the play? Like, how do you beat a burn deck? Like, just summon one
Uh,
guy and beat down? Is that the strat, or?
Against Chainburn, it was definitely about like you didn't need all the card advantage, like because the deck just lets you do your stuff. It doesn't interrupt you. Like you could have, if you wanted to, you could have just summoned as many things as you want. You can like accumulate as many cards as you want. But it was actually bad because they would like ceasefire or secret barrel or just desserts and all that kind of stuff. So you would be trying to you should be trying to play around that. Um, by not putting as many cards on the field, sometimes even getting rid of your own cards just so you had less in total, like even in your hand. Like you would like get rid of your own stuff relatively fast, like tribute summon over another tribute monster or something like that, just to minimize your cards. You'd obviously want, if you had that, you really wanted like tricks to avoid taking damage from something like Dimension Wall, like attacking and like only attacking with a big monster when you had like a Book of Moon, for example. So in case they have that, you can cancel your own attack and all that kind of stuff. Um, I think it's just a lot of small things. Like people would play against the burn deck, how they would play against a normal Yu-Gi-Oh deck, which was just causing them to lose. And also burn randomly. I noticed this during the Master Duel Goat event, which wasn't quite Goat but close. There's a lot of really strong floodgates for the time being. Like we're stuff that we don't play anymore today, but back in the day, like something like a Messenger of Peace or level limit area A or B, like that stuff was actually oppressive. Like I noticed that during that event where it's like, well, you know, my opponent has activated Wave Motion Cannon and Messenger of Peace, and I'm sitting there and I'm like, yeah, I'll die. Not right now, but like in a couple turns, I'm dead. Like I
It's
can't do anything.
it's really funny how like Messenger Piece was like 100 costs, and that was the only maintenance thing. Like
Yeah.
that's crazy that was that cheap, by the way. But yeah, like those floodgates are like really horrible because there's no other way to really floodgate an opponent. Like a skill drain or something, I think was released in 2007 or 8 or
Oh,
something,
Skill
maybe
Drain is a
later on in the time.
2004 card. Skill Drain is a
Oh,
pretty,
really? Yeah.
yeah. Dark
Well, no one
Price.
even plays it in those old formats because why would you, right?
There are Skill Drain decks, but they are
Yeah, they kind of
dedicated Skill
like for
Drain decks.
different reasons though. It's like
Yeah.
to summon Barbaros and negate your own
Yeah.
Fusilier and
It's
shit,
like
right?
you play a lot of stuff that doesn't care about skill drain. Your opponent probably plays stuff that does care about skill drain, but it's
Hmm.
not primarily used to completely floodgate the opponent. It's like you're getting benefit because you're playing like Fusilier Dragon or something, which you can normal summon and it's a 2800 if skill drain is up, and then you tribute it for like the virus cards or something like that. Like there were decks like that, but it wasn't like it wasn't meant to be a stun deck. It was just basically, hey, I'm gonna flip skill drain, and my deck plays a little bit better than your deck under it, but I'm not auto winning. Oh yeah.
Yep. Should we go to 2006 or something?
Well, yeah, we've already talked about Stein, which is
Sorry,
the majority
7.
of 2006. Towards the end of 2006, which leads us into 2007, is the release of I think Stratos in the OCG. I don't think it's actually a TCG release until 2007, so I think it's fair to hop into 2007, which is where I start to have distinct memories of these formats because that's where I started not affording these decks on my own, but I was going to locals and seeing people play with those cards. And for a lot of these cards, I just remember them as looking at them as a kid and really wanting them, not playing them myself, but seeing other people play with them in the format.
Aw.
Which is specifically, I think the hero cards, a lot of like Stratos. 2007 is also the year of the Destiny hero releases. I think Malicious, Destiny Draw, this Commander. One of my favorite cards that came out at the time was Card Trooper, which dominates the very early 2007 because Card Trooper plus machine duplication was apparently completely insane, which from today's perspective is also weird because if my opponent goes normal summon Card Trooper and then activates machine duplication, that's kind of goofy. But
Oh man. Uh, I have a tiny bit of experience for this format.
Mhm,
The Yugi Chiber Grand Championship of like 2018 or 19 or something
mhm,
that Simo hosted was multiple formats. So I think I played in the final. It was against House of Champs. I played like 2014 format,
mhm,
modern at the time, whatever it was. I think it was 2019, and then 2007,
mhm,
which what do we call it? I think it's like known as Perfect Circle, or maybe that's like a different
I
type of
love
deck at
Perfect
that time.
Circle. Perfect Circle is towards the end of 2007. Perfect Circle is like the quote unquote balanced version of the beginning of the year. Like to the beginning of 2007 is pretty wild. And then in Perfect Circle is when they've toned it down a little bit to a point where it's actually like a pretty good format.
Right. Okay. That's fair. Because I remember like using like Diamond Dude Turbo and then
Mhm.
having to like ask a judge about like every card in the game every single turn. Um, like stuff like that. It was really funny. Like it's weird. It's weird they don't make cards like that anymore. You know, just complete total exceptions to the rules of conventional card design. Yeah, copy
Yeah.
effects in Yu-Gi-Oh are the worst, but yeah, there's like a
Goldak
lot of cool
mentioned.
decks here.
Yeah, I personally I have a Perfect Circle deck. I have the cards for it because it's a format that I really really like, and it's a format that I especially wanted to build a deck for because, like I said at the time, I always thought that it was super cool, like being able to play this. Because the reason why it's called Perfect Circle is because you have all these cards that create some board presence that you contribute. Then, like you play, it's like the core essence of the deck is like you play like Treeborn Frog, Destiny Heroes with Stratos and Militias and Disc Commander. And you play like Call of the Haunted and Limit Reverse for that Disc Commander, so you can draw cards. You summon Light and Darkness Dragon, which takes resources from your opponent to out. And then when the Light and Darkness Dragon gets destroyed, you bring back the Disc Commander, you draw cards, you refill your hand, you do it again because the Treeborn comes back. You play Ryza, which is really cool. It's like the best Monarch before Caius came out. And you have just like some good stuff, spells and traps, and it's this really really cool format that I
I'm
never
not really
got to
sure where the
play.
circle is coming in there. Like,
It's
is
not
it
really
just
a perfect
everything is
circle.
in
Look,
harmony with
it's
each
that's
other?
what people called it. It's not really
Okay.
a perfect circle. It's not an infinite loop.
Okay.
It's just the whole idea of like Treeborn Frog and Malicious tribute summon Light and Darkness Dragon, and that circles
Yeah.
back this commander, so you redraw your hand, and then Treeborn comes back, and you can do it again. I think that's like roughly the idea. But
In
yeah,
some ways, you could say a single copy of Snake Eye Ash is a perfect circle
it's
just by
probably a more
itself.
perfect circle than the entire year of 2007. Yes.
God, Light and Darkness Dragon, what an absolute tank, by the way. They
Yes.
recently made some support, I guess, in some respect, or a retrade, I guess you could
Yeah.
call it. I think it's a fusion. This thing was like a horrible card to deal with because you had to just like waste your cards into it
Mhm.
um, to bring its attack down, or like find a way to like chain something to it in order to deal with it.
Yeah.
So yeah, Light and Darkness Dragon historically like probably one of the most powerful boss monsters in this era.
Yeah, and one of the first ones that I remember that it was actually worth tributing two monsters for. That was a very, very rare um thing to happen. Like before then, one tributes were kind of like the norm. Like that was the maximum you were willing to invest for a tribute summon. And then I guess Treeborn Frog kind of changed the perspective on that a little bit. But for a long, long time, I think Light and Darkness Dragon was the only card you would really consider tributing two monsters for. Right? Like even with Treeborn Frog in the mix, like something like Frog Monarchs, which is a deck like later on, never really played any other two tribute monsters than Light and Darkness Dragon. Like that was the only two tributor people really summoned between like for the majority of those years. Can't think of another one that was worth it. But yeah,
Time to move into Glad Beast and Dad, maybe.
yes, yes. Just to round out 2007, personally, I think Perfect Circle is a great format to look into if you're looking for something that feels very retro, but is not as slow paced as GOAT. And I would say Perfect Circle is probably it's definitely in my top 10 retro formats. Maybe it's even top 5. I like it a lot. It feels it's very slow compared to today still, but I like it a lot. And
Yeah, kind of
we're picking
test.
up the pace in 2008 because Dark Arm Dragon is coming out. Phantom Darkness was insane. Phantom Darkness was kind of like the next. There are certain sets in the Yu-Gi-Oh history, like Invasion of Chaos that we mentioned previously, that probably go down as like the best sets in history, like super game changing. And Phantom Darkness is definitely the next one.
Yeah, so does Glad Beast come before it in like its own format kind of thing? Because I feel like there was like almost a tier 0 Glad Beast format in one point in Yu-Gi-Oh's history.
No, Glad Beast comes after Dark Armed.
Really? Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Which is crazy to think about because Glad Beast actually rivals Dark Armed decks. Like
Yeah.
it's Dark Armed Return is the first format, and then Gladiator's Assault releases, I think, and that rivals Dark Armed for a long period of time. Like it's literally like it's on par, I think.
Hmm. Okay.
It's like you have
People
Dark
saying
Armed
Glad is
Return
before,
first.
by the way.
Hmm?
People saying Glad was before. Glad, then Photon Darkness, then Legacy of Destruction.
Okay,
Or
let me
Light of
actually
Destruction, technically.
set release schedule. I think it
But I think
maybe you're right. Maybe it's
I think it was just no Gazaris or something. Some
right. No,
important piece.
you're right. It's because the Geysaris or Gazaris is in Light of Destruction, which is after Phantom Darkness. And I think the War Chariot, which is another great addition to it, is in Duelist Genesis, which is the release of Synchros.
Is that just like the straight up Rota?
No, that was in Phantom Darkness actually. The Rota is
Oh,
in
that's the
Phantom
Judgment,
Darkness.
isn't it?
It's the Solemn Strike, the effect negation.
Yeah, I see. Yeah, so I think one of the like known things kind of about Glad Beast is like this was the best budget deck, I think, at the time, because if you're playing Dad, you're playing like
Okay,
I mean
yes. So
an
not yet.
optimal Dad deck.
Not
okay,
yet.
go on.
Because like I mean you're right. Dark Armed Dragon, like that return at this time, this is before Synchros come out. It's just this slob of dark monsters. You're doing some banishing with like Dark Magician of Chaos, maybe, and you're playing like Return from the Different Dimension and all that kind of stuff. So you're trying to like manipulate your graveyard, get 3 darks, summon Dark Arm, banish some darks, bring them back, and kill the opponent. And it was like facilitated by like Stratos, draw power, allure, destiny draw, all that kind of stuff, right? So a lot faster than what people are used to, but it was insanely expensive. It was insanely expensive. Because like Dark Armed Dragon was I never owned one at that time, so I can't tell you exactly what you would have had to pay for it, but it was definitely 150 or more. Maybe it was even 200 per Dark Armed.
Which is like crazy to because like if you adjust for inflation like
That's
that long
insane.
ago, you're paying like 200 like easy.
And we haven't even talked about Crush Card Virus yet, which was a Shonen Jump promo at this time still, I think. I think it comes out in a Gold Series maybe in 2008 or 9, but even then it was still over $200 for a Crush card, I think.
Even
but
in
the
gold?
Shonen, yeah, the Gold Series one was like 200, I think.
Jeez.
And that's because the only other print was a Shonen, and it was short printed to Oblivion in the Gold Series. Like it was like 1 per case or something like that. I don't remember exactly.
Imagine being the guy who bought the prize card Crush card to like crush his locals.
Well,
they reprint it in gold.
From today's perspective, it would have been a pretty good investment because ironically, it's weird because like the stuff from main sets was incredibly expensive, but if you look at it from today's perspective, the something like prize cards were super cheap. I think like the high investment that you're talking about for a prize card Crush card was like $800 is what we're talking. Which if I'm being offered an ultra, if anyone has an ultra rare Crush card and they're trying to get rid of it for $800, message me.
Yeah, that's things like we're looking at 5 digits easy for like
we
those
are
old,
looking at 5
prize
digits,
cards.
I think, for a Crush card these days. Probably not even in the 10,000. Maybe I don't know exactly. I'm not an expert at that. But like it was definitely right off the like it was something wasn't right. Like why was the Dark Armed Dragon you can pull from Phantom Darkness 200, and then the Crush card you can only win for winning one of like I don't know how many Shonen Jumps there were at the time, but there was like 30 copies of it or 50 copies or whatever, and that's 600. That doesn't add up at all, or 800 or whatever what it exactly was. I guess it depends on who you got it from and what they wanted for it, but something was not right. And then about Gladiator Beast being a budget deck, it was relatively budget except for Heraklinos, which was a secret rare and also incredibly expensive. Not quite Dark Armed Dragon level, but it was definitely the level where I could not afford it when I was playing in 2008. Like it was Heraklinos and Test Tiger, which was an ultra rare in Gladiator's Assault. Those two made it hard to afford Glad Beast immediately, especially when they picked up meta presence. So I wasn't able to play that, but I was able to play it after and this is when I start playing actual competitive decks, is when they released, and this might already be 2009, but they released a, what was it called at the time? Turbo Pack. And there was an ultimate rare Heraklinos in a turbo pack. And ironically, that made the price go down, which is also not something that happens nowadays. Nowadays, when they release an OTS ulti of Kurikara, people are like, well, that's a reprint, but it's not really going to change anything because it's going to be more expensive than the original version. Which is the same thing that happened with Chaos Angel. But at the time, and I also cannot explain to you why that was, when Heraklinos came out as an ultimate rare in the turbo pack, it went for $15 or something. So suddenly it was affordable, and I have no idea why. It looked better than the secret, and it was not even that easy to obtain. But for some reason, at the time, simpler times, reprint meant card go down, and it was just fine to play Gladbeast then. And the same is true for Judgment Dragon. Judgment Dragon, which I guess we're talking Lightsworn real quick, which is also 2009, one of the next best decks after like Gladbeast and Dark Armed. The Judgment Dragon Ultimate Rare reprint was actually an affordable card at the time, which is funny.
An affordable JD. That's something. Just looking at these deck lists, it's like, man, this really was like the vanilla Lightsworn period. It's like just Lumina, Lila, Celestia, even. My God.
Yeah, good times.
And then just power spells, which is.
I mean, the deck was after the release of Charge of the Light Brigade as well. The deck was just incredible, right? You have like 3 Solar Recharge, 3 Charges, which we have it today. For anyone who's played in 2009, if you told them that those cards would be back at 3, they would not believe you. They would be like, "That's crazy. That can never happen."
Yeah, and to hear people saying things like, Solar Recharge is kind of bricky today. I don't know if you'd play it.
That's insane.
Because there's only like 3 playable Lightsworns. So.
But we skipped over. But I moved on to 2009 a little bit too fast because we skipped the entire release of Synchros.
Yeah, Synchro Cats, I think.
2008. No, Teledad as well. Teledad is like the first meta Synchro deck with the Duelist Genesis. Which brings out, I think Duelist Genesis was the very first Synchro set. It's the Stardust Dragon, Krebon's Emergency Teleport package, which obviously was slotted right into, since it was a lot of Darks with the Psychics, like the Krebons, it was obviously slotted into Dark Armed and created this super, super powerful Tier 0 Teledad deck, which was incredibly strong. Actually is fun to play with. Looking back at it, it's incredibly powerful, and I think the one downside to this format is that if you're looking to play historic Teledad 2008, you are basically limited to playing Teledad mirror matches, which that's not for everyone. Especially, I think that is something I've learned about Time Wizard formats is like, even if the mirror match was skillful at the time, which is also the case for some formats that we're going to talk about later, like Necros or Dragon Ruler, which are formats that I experienced being very good at the time. When you're revisiting a Time Wizard format, I feel like that's bad. That's just a bad thing if there's only 1 or 2 decks, because that gets stale by nature. Even if the mirror is super, super good, I'm not going to sit down and be dedicated to a Time Wizard format for it to only be the same matchup every time. Right? Because eventually, if there's a lot of skill sets in the mirror match, eventually people are going to learn those, and then the mirror gets less interesting if everyone's good at it, because that's the only deck in the format, right? So anyone you sit down with who's been playing Teledad format probably knows the ins and out of the Teledad mirror match, and then it's just not as interesting anymore.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing to revisit and do like as a for fun thing. Like going back and playing like a card for card Goat Mirror, a card for card like Tengu Plant Mirror. They're still pretty enjoyable, I think. But yeah, I mean, I think with anything, if you do it too much, it might just get a bit boring.
Yeah, and I think that's also why Edison is so successful, is because it just maybe it gets boring eventually, but because there's so many different decks, we haven't reached that point. At least I haven't, and I've played a lot of Edison, and I think most people that are super into Edison also just don't get tired of it because there's so much diversity. And so even though maybe playing wise or nostalgia wise, it might not be the very best format, I think that's why it's currently the most popular, because it doesn't get stale as fast.
Yeah, so I mean, Teledad, really good deck because E-Teleport for Krebons with the Destiny Hero Malicious that you summon from the grave that you discard for the D-Draw that's giving you 2 cards. Make a bunch of 6 and 8 Synchros. One of the biggest Synchro monsters is Stardust Dragon, because it's really hard to out monsters without destroying them in pre like 2014 or something. Goyo Garden as well is just ridiculous because it's the biggest level 6 synchro that also creates card advantage by stealing your opponent's grave. It
And
was
notably bigger
unbelievable.
than most go-to level 8 synchros as well, which was also kind of crazy. Like a Stardust, or like the ones you would make to protect your board were like Thought Ruler or Stardust, and those are all smaller than Goyo Guardian.
Yeah, Goyo stealing a Stardust, man. Oof.
It's not that crazy because if you negate with it, you have to give it back. Like your opponent gets it, but
Oh, is that how that works?
that's
Okay,
how it works. Yeah.
interesting. Nice. Yeah, which one of the most criminal erratas in the game. I can't believe they
Dude, I hate what
did
they did
Goyo
to
like
my
that.
boy Goyo Guardian. Like in general, I'm not a fan of errata in cards, especially now that like I felt it really badly when the Time Wizard thing happened in Master Duel, and it's like, well, we're going back to the time, but we can't play the same exact effects because the cards have changed, like Brain Control or Ring of
Mm,
Destruction or something like that. Goyo Guardian, probably one of the cards who's been hit the worst out of everything
yeah.
because the card is literally unplayable. Um, and I mean, to be fair, it would be unplayable if they really like. I don't. That card didn't need an errata to begin with. Like that's the crazy part. Like that card
Yeah.
would be at 5 right now, and people would be playing 0 copies. Um, and they still somehow felt the need to change it before it could come back. I don't know, but yeah.
All right, that is the
That's basically
Teledad deck.
2008 Teledad in the books, and then we were entering 2009, which is Lightsworn and Cat dominated. Which Cat I would consider the first time, like this is the first time where I get to play meta decks because, like I said, Gladiator Beast became cheaper with the Heraklinos reprint. Lightsworn initially super expensive in 2008, I think is when it drops, but it gets cheap relatively fast in 2009. Or I don't know if it was actually cheap, but like it was affordable, let's say, because they reprinted Charge and JD, which were the main two really expensive ones. And I think they also reprinted Honest relatively quickly. Um, so that deck
Honest,
became
being one of the first hand traps, which
yes.
is crazy to think about. That just a battle trap that increases your attack was so terrifying, and you would never go near that card today because they gave us Dark Honest for dark attributes, which is arguably better than light decks, and cards
No one is
basically
doing any
unplayable.
of that. Yeah. And then there's Cat, which is one of my first times that I remember having like a sort of like favorite deck. I loved Cat Synchro at the time, and I kept trying to play it for like the next 1 or 2 years, no matter what the format was. Like let it be. I mean, we didn't call it Edison format at the time, obviously, but during that period, I was trying to play Cat Synchro, and even during like the towards the later half of 2010, I was trying to mess around with Cat Synchro a lot. Really cool deck. Obviously, trying to use Rescue Cat to summon 2 copies of X Saber Airbellum, which is a level 3 beast tuner that if you can connect with it directly, your opponent loses a card from their hand. And you're trying to synchro those with like spellcasters specifically to make Arcanite Magician to pop 2 cards, and so you're combining it with like Summoner Monk to summon the cat, or you're gonna use Gravekeeper's Spy and all that kind of stuff to set up some spellcasters, and then use Pot of Avarice to shuffle back your cat because it was limited relatively fast, and then do it all over. So yeah.
Avarice is at 3 now, which is crazy to think because it just sounds like and reads like an incredible broken card. But when you're not getting multiple turns, it's significantly worse. But it was like such a powerful card around about this era, um, because there was so many like engine cards that you could just keep recycling. Like I think at some point later we're probably going to mention Tour Guide, like recycling targets for that, recycling Tengus.
Yep.
Huge part of the resource game that Avarice offered.
I mean, it is also notably the time where we start getting into the reason why Pot of Avarice wasn't like completely insane right when it came out was because it wasn't that easy to fill up your graveyard. But we're starting to see this where either like different decks have different ways to just like dump a bunch of stuff into the graveyard, like Lightsworn milling, Card Trooper milling, but also like Rescue Cat is like the first, probably not the first, but like one of the earlier examples of just like using one card, like one monster that essentially kind of like a 1 card combo, that like summons other monsters from your deck, which then you synchro with, and that put like one cat puts up to 4 monsters into the graveyard. Because Cat goes into the grave, you summon Airbellum and Raiko. that make an android or a cataster, and that eventually hits the graveyard as well. So one cat puts 4 monsters into the graveyard, which is we're almost there, right? So um
Mm.
you hit that like that period of time where a single monster card just does more and puts more other monsters into the graveyard. So Pot of Avarice becomes very strong here because the game is not too fast yet for it, right? Like nowadays, obviously we can name a bunch of monsters that can fill Pot of Avarice on their own. Like like technically, if you normal summon Snake Eye Ash, you can resolve Pot of Avarice afterwards. But like obviously, the format is too fast, and you don't need to do that because if you resolve Snake Eye Ash that far, you don't need to worry about using Pot of Avarice, right? And so the game is like right at that turning point where cards do more, load up the graveyard easier, but it's not too fast yet for Pot of Avarice.
Yeah.
So 2009, I think, is cool. I think 2009 is a cool year. If you ever want to revisit it, it's a little wild, definitely. Lightsworn and so on and so forth is. I feel like 2010 is a more balanced version of 2009 because most of the decks like Lightsworn or Cat still exist. Towards the beginning of 2010, if you're talking like Edison format and stuff, but they are a little toned down. So I guess 2010 is something that we've mentioned a lot already, and we might as well get into it because it's the year of Edison format, and that's
Good
probably
starting
the
point.
most popular Time Wizard format as of today.
Yeah. Tiny bit before Edison, I guess there's like Frogs, I suppose, which is a deck I've randomly played before. And fun caveat: this deck won Worlds.
That's
Uh,
post Edison though. Like Ronin Totem isn't out yet.
oh, okay, cool. Oh yeah, because
It's
you need Ronin Totem for this,
Yeah,
but
exactly. Edison starts like
mm,
2010 basically starts with Edison, and then you have like Edison, and I think that's why people play Edison is because it has so much diversity, so many different things without anything in particular feeling super broken. Like a lot of the stuff, and that's one of the things that I love about Edison format is a lot of cards from that era, if you find them cool, you can somewhat make them work in Edison format, unless it's a complete garbage card. Like if it's a somewhat reasonable card or strategy, you can probably make it work in Edison format because there's nothing super oppressive, no deck that's so good that you can't beat it. And there's a lot of diversity in Edison format, right? And then towards the end of 2010, there's a couple of really strong individual cards released into that format which makes them stand out and kind of breaks it, right? And one of those cards is Ronin Totem, which bring it back, did nothing wrong. Substitoad's fault. You can take back your stupid Substitoad, give me back the Ronin Totem. Anyways, I'm yapping. Um yeah,
this
Edison
was
format's great.
one of the first consistent FTK decks, right?
It is so good. And it's very funny to me personally because I may have told this story before, at least on stream. I know I've told it. I don't know if you know it. But at the time, I didn't understand Frog FTK. I tried it. I heard about it. I tried it at locals and it didn't work for me. And I was like, why does this not work? This deck sucks. Because I didn't understand exactly how to use it. Because some of the intricacies behind it, I didn't understand. Because it was like, obviously the basic idea is you play a bunch of frogs, and because Substitoad is not once per turn, you're trying to get Substitoad plus another monster onto the field, and then you're tributing through all of your frogs, your swap frogs, and Ronin Totem from the decks to the graveyard, and then you just banish a bunch of frogs for Ronin Totems over and over and tribute them for Mass Drivers, right? And so I thought in 2010, well, naturally you need to open a way to Substitoad, a way to put another monster onto the field, and Mass Driver, right? And so I tried
Three-card
the deck.
FTK.
I tried the deck, and I obviously that didn't happen very often because that's like a 3-card combo that specifically needs like 1-for-1 to special the Substitoad, or you need like Swap Frog plus a water plus Substitoad, and you need to hard draw the Mass Drive, and it didn't happen very often. Like I spent an entire day at locals thinking like, wow, this deck sucks. Why am I even bothering? Like what's the point of this? And like it wasn't until I don't even know when I learned it because I wasn't like spending much time on the internet. I don't even know if there were that many resources back in the day. But I learned like years later probably that the whole point, the reason why the deck was so broken was because of Poison Draw Frog.
Okay.
Yeah, you didn't actually need to draw Mass Driver.
What does Poison Draw do? It's
So
is it
Poison
the
Draw
grave
Frog,
one?
Poison Draw Frog, as the name suggests, draws cards, but it misses timing. And it says specifically something stupid like if it's sent when it's sent from the field to the graveyard, you can draw a card. Um, but it needs to be like this face up card needs to be sent to the graveyard, and then you can draw a card. And the
Mhm.
thing that I never realized was the way you were supposed to do the frog FTK was you were supposed to cycle through a significant portion of your frogs, but not through the swab frogs and the poison draw frogs. So what you would do is you would like you'd start with Substitute plus another monster. You would tribute that monster, dump a bunch of the random frogs into the graveyard, the Hufflepuff frogs, right? And then you would bring back Ronin Toad in once, and you would tribute that, so you would have more bodies than before. And then you would summon a Poison Draw Frog, and then you couldn't tribute Poison Draw Frog to draw a card because that would miss timing. But you could tribute another monster to summon Swap Frog, and then use Swap Frog's effect to send you, because Swap Frog can send to the from the field, right? Anyone who's ever activated Swap Frog without a target in deck in Master Duel has made that experience. Swap Frog can send itself from the field. Or what you would do is you would send the Poison Draw Frog from the field to the graveyard, which wouldn't miss timing, and then you would draw a card. And because you had thinned your entire deck um, by emptying it of like 20 frogs, the only thing that were left were draw cards and Mass Driver. And then
Okay,
maybe
I
like a
see.
Heavy Storm. But because you could do this 3 times, you would draw 3 cards. And if you didn't have Mass Driver, you were like 90 something % guaranteed to find it. Because even if you drew one of your other, like if you drew like Moray of Greed or Salvage, those would translate into more draws, right? Because you could salvage back Poison Draw Frogs and Swap Frogs, put them back with Moray. And then even if you didn't draw the Mass Driver, you could try again. And it was basically guaranteed. And I didn't know that. I thought the deck sucked because I didn't realize that's what you could do. Because I thought the thing missed timing. You can't tribute it for Substitute. 15-year-old
It's
me thought the deck sucked.
it's so like weird, right? Because like, how would you ever figure that out, right? You have to like literally sit there and just work it out yourself.
Yeah,
Because even if there is resources online, a lot of people like don't share, right? Because I
I
think it's something
think
we take for granted today. Is like
I
the age of sharing
yeah
isn't actually that big
yeah
until recently.
yeah, and I think this was definitely part of the reason why. Looking back at it, I don't remember the deck even being that popular. I don't think I was alone with this. I don't know how many people still play from that time. I mean, I don't know how many of them can confidently say, "Yeah, I knew that," because I remember only very few distinct like pro players at the time when I went to like more like regional events or something like that. Not many people played Frog FTK. Even at Worlds, it wasn't that popular. Like yes, Galley won with it, but there was maybe like I want to say like 3 people playing it or something.
Mm.
And on I don't remember playing against this deck very often, right? And so I don't know if that was just a me issue or if like a lot of people didn't figure that one out, how to use it like optimally, right? Because a lot of people would use I think the like because what that also does is you have to play more frogs because you banish some in order to draw extra cards, right? So you can't tribute those for Mass Driver later. So like the ideal ones used like 23 frogs or something, even though the actual number you need for the Mass Driver kill is like 20 with the Ronin Totem, right? You don't need 24 or something. But if you want to get those extra draws, you need to play like more than 20. And I always,
Mm.
I probably looked at these lists and I was like, dude, they're stupid. They're playing 24 frogs. Why they don't need those? Can't they do simple math? Like 24 times 400, that's way more than you need. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know how many people actually knew about
Yeah, Unifrog or whatever. Like, there's some really bad frogs in the game.
that. Dude, Unifrog's fine. That actually sees play in Edison format. That's a one of in
Oh
frog
damn, that's
decks.
crazy.
Unifrog's fine. Unifrog's killer.
Okay. 2011-ish, I suppose. I don't know anything about this year. Is this where we get is this finally the Tengu plant thing, or is that 2012 or something?
Tango Plant is towards the end of 2011. We were skipping
Okay.
over like 2010 still has X Saber, which is really really cool. And 2011 is when we start with. I think we have like a period where Six Samurai appears, which I hated at the time. Any retro format that Six Samurai with Chien is in, I probably don't like as much. Um,
Isn't Six Sam like almost tier 0?
it was for a very brief period of time when Gateway came out. Gateway was like at 3, and it's the most insane card ever. Or
I
rather,
think
no, I think
Gateway was
Gateway.
one of the
No, no, no.
fastest hits or
Actually, no.
something.
I'm yapping. Gateway was at 3 for a long time because it's come out a long time ago. But
Oh.
Six Samurai only had like very limited resources. But then when the new Six Samurai support came out, the tuner and the synchro and all that, and Kizan, suddenly Gateway was completely insane. Like if someone opened Gateway, like they would not lose that game pretty much.
Mm.
And that was a thing for like a month or two maybe until it immediately got limited, I think, which is it's a crazy thing to limit Gateway anyways. Like that card's banned or should have been banned. But they put a stop to that relatively quickly, and then Six Samurai was just like a solid deck. It was pretty cringe to be honest, because it summoned like one of the first Omni Negates, or basically Omni Negates, right? Spell Trap Omni at the time was like really really strong, um, and just played like protecting it with like back row and stuff. But and then sometimes it drew Gateway, which was completely insane.
Yeah, I mean that deck like looked ridiculous. And even today, like if you're ever doing like anything with Six Samurai, it's always revolving around like some gateway FTK, which thank God nothing of that sorts has ever been meta relevant. But hey, like you can, it's one of those like dumb YouTube combos where
Yeah.
whenever you see like Sam getting Jesse onto his channel to like summon all three god
Yeah.
cards or
Yeah.
just some stupid thing, like you can do
Yeah.
anything in the game with this card. So
Yeah.
thankfully this deck never really lasted.
Yeah. It was a menace though for like a year or two after the legendary Six Samurais came out. Like that was definitely a deck I did not like that much at the time, but it's I guess it's fine. And yeah, and then we're getting into 2011 territory, which has a lot of cool stuff. Tengu Plant, notably, is pretty cool. It also, I think, releases one of your favorite decks. It's Infernity, right? That's towards the end of 2010. And
Ooh.
then Meta in 2011. It's a pretty cool deck, even though from today's perspective, probably classified as like a pretty like it's pretty much just a combo deck that tries to auto win the game by setting like 3 counter traps, but it's pretty cool.
Isn't Infernity like also not even like well, it's obviously not an Xyz deck. It's just like multiple Trishes or something, right? Like isn't
There
that like what the
is different iterations of it. In the beginning, I remember people playing Infernity Beetle as their tuner, which was the level 2 tuner that you could tribute to
Beetle?
summon 2 from the deck when you had no cards in hand. And they would use that because like the loop is always like Necromancer, Archfiend, Launcher, bring back other stuff, and then you'd have like level 3, level 4, and level 2, which was 9. So you would make like Trishula or something like that. But relatively quickly, I think people moved away from that to Infernity Avenger as their tuner, which was level 1. And then they would go, it was Necromancer, Archfiend, and Avenger would make a what was it guy called? 100 Eyes Dragon. And 100
Mm.
Eyes Dragon would copy Infernity Mirage, copy the effect, then you would tribute that to bring back Necromancer and Archfiend. Archfiend searched a barrier, um, or something else, whichever you wanted to search, and then Necromancer could bring back the Avenger again. So basically, with every loop you went through, every time you made 100 Ice Dragon, you got one extra search, right? And so you get like a barrier as long as you had mirages in the graveyard, basically, right? Because as soon as you run out of mirages, you can't copy any further with the 100 eyes because you have to banish it. But that was basically the loop. With Infernity, I think it's what people figured out to be the best in 2011. The reason why I kind of look back fondly on Infernity, even though it kind of has that stupid auto win condition or whatever you want to call it, the reason why I kind of think it was cool was because it was the kind of deck that was still, it took some time to set up. I think if you're playing the right retro format with Infernity in it, where it's not completely insane with like triple launcher or something, the deck actually has to play a little bit of a grind game before it can pop off. It's kind of like about uh trying to play a grind game and find the right spot to push, and then when it's successful, then you win. So it's not as degenerate as like a turn one combo these days. Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
So Plant Synchro, I think is
Mhm.
here. Do we want to mention that a bit?
Plant Synchro was cool. I think at the time, Tengu Plant was really, really dominant. I think nowadays people revisit the format and they find other things that are actually surprisingly good, like Infernity, which is still like during at the time I don't remember anyone playing. Infernity when Tengu Plant was around. Like that was like Infernity was a thing towards the end of 2010 and maybe early 2011. But as soon as we got like Hyper Liberian and Tengu and Spore and Glow Up Bulb and all that kind of stuff, I don't remember people playing much Infernity anymore. I think it's just now that that Infernity is like more popular in that period of time.
Mm.
But yeah, at the time it was just a lot of different versions of Tengu Plant. There's like TG Stun, which is like the Stun Andes deck of the format, which is just
Yep.
skill drain, TGs, and Horn of the Phantom Beast, which was just from nowadays perspective, it's
20 trap
insane to
cards.
think that that was a really good card, but that card was a menace to go up against.
So Horde of the Phantom Beast is an attack boost that lets you draw when you kill something or deal battle damage.
It's I think when it destroys a monster by battle, you get to draw a card. So it equips to
Yeah.
a Beast Warrior, I think. I don't know if it's exclusively Beast Warrior or if it's all the tri types. But it's plus 800 equip that whenever you destroy something, you draw a card. And it was just basically they would flip skill drain, summon the Rush Rhino, which was 1600 attack, boost it to 24, and then they would draw extra cards every turn, and they would keep adding to their back row. And it was just like at that point, it was just GG's, right?
So one of the first decks I played in like 2013, I think, was like an agent structure deck. And I think this is like the heyday of agents is this period here, right?
I personally don't think it was ever that strong, but it did win Worlds, which I don't remember exactly what the restrictions for the Worlds format were back then. But it did win the World Championship. I never liked it because it obviously had to play the 3 Shine Balls. I hated having to draw those sometimes when you play Venus. But obviously with the release, I mean, at the time, Venus summoning 2 Shine Balls overlaying into Gachi Gachi Gantetsu was like a crazy opener, right? Because you had a 2000 beater and a Gachi Gachi that would boost everything. That was kind of nice. And then Master Hyperion was one of the better main deck boss monsters at the time. You know, it wasn't quite Dark Armed or Judgment Dragon, but it was pretty close. Well,
How do
not
you
that
summon
close.
Hyperion? Like, because I know like technically you're supposed to play like Sanctuary in the Sky, but no one actually ran that.
Yeah, it's like you have to. I know you have to banish an
Banishing
agent from
an
the grave.
agent from hand, field, or
Top.
grave to summon it.
Yeah, and then it's like
Um,
banish more agents to pop more cards.
yeah, so it just banishes a light fairy to pop a card in the field, but Sanctuary in the Sky lets you pop twice, so that was just never worth playing what was essentially a bad
Yeah.
card. Interesting. Okay. There's like a lot of chaos elements in here as well. You've got like tour guides, Tragodia, and
Hmm.
of course that means you can throw in BLS. What does Birdman do for this deck?
I
Oh, I
think
guess
it was
like
just a free
Venus, and
tuner.
then
Yeah,
all right, okay, because like
like
Venus summons
the
like free balls. You can make a Gantetsu, and then the third ball can be made with a can bounce with a Birdman to make a 6, I suppose.
Can Venus
Interesting.
summon from hand? Because maybe that was another thing. Like you could just bounce a ball in and summon it back, so you it basically
Hander
goes free.
deck, yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. Doesn't look like my kind of deck for this period. I don't know why. Like, because it was really weird. Because when I started playing, I was very fixated on the themes. So I was like, oh, I
Yep.
like the concept of a fairy deck. I want to play a
Yep.
fairy deck, and that's how I ended up picking up agents,
Mhm.
which was kind of fun. But I mean, not exactly the best deck into Dragon Ruler format. But anyway,
You're like 2 years late to the party because in
yeah,
2011 that deck
literally.
was pretty good. 2013 I don't think it was a thing anymore. But
Nope.
yeah, no, Tengu Plant is another format that I think is or has the potential to become like another really popular retro format because it is pretty fun. And I think looking back at it from today's perspective, there's actually a lot more diversity than people realized at the time because it was very dominated by Tengu Plant at the time. But I think there's definitely decks that can mess with Tengu Plant. Um, Unironically, also because Maxi is a thing now. That came out in 2011, and it's starting to see some play in that time period. Not a complete mainstay staple yet, because it is not great against everything in the format. You know, some people are still playing decks like TG Stun, where the card, like literally, if you're lucky, gets you a draw. So
If you're lucky.
some people wouldn't even main deck Maxis at all. Some people would side deck them. Probably
Or
some
play
people
like
not
2
playing them at all.
copies or
Yeah.
something. Yeah, it's crazy to
Um,
think just how what's the word? Behind the time Maxi was in some ways. Or like you could argue like it was the perfect time, right? It was like the sweet spot for
I
when
would say,
Maxi was a
yeah,
good card,
I would
health
say
wise.
from the perspective of 2011, Maxi was a well designed card. Obviously, it aged very poorly, But at the time, for the next 1 or 2, maybe even 3 years, I think Maxi was like all right.
Yeah.
It actually wasn't considered to be a problem until like 2015 maybe is when it's starting to really be a problem. But
So what I was going to suggest is very clearly this is a long one. I'm thinking we do like a part 2, right? Because we've basically
okay,
halfway through the game's
yeah.
history. So making a
Yeah, I
part
was
2 of
afraid
this
this was
could
gonna
really
happen because yapping about the history of the game is always
there's so much to talk about. It really is so interesting, and
yeah.
I wish I could offer more, but I just I wasn't really around at this time.
I
But
mean,
playing
we're
a little bit
getting into the period
historically.
where you can offer your perspective as well. But I for
Oh
completion's
yes.
sake, I wanted to do the first half basically as
Sh-
well.
should we wrap up? I think 2012, and then that just makes sense to go from 13 to 24 for the next
Okay,
episodes.
yeah,
That
all right,
sounds good.
fine.
All
Yeah,
right.
my
So
I brought up this topic because we were kind of scrambling for a topic, and I just brought it up. I didn't actually plan on how long we were gonna yap about each individual section. But you're right. I'm looking at the time, and I'm like, we are not halfway through. That is true.
no, this is really fun though. So we can
Yeah.
definitely make this a two-parter. Let's wrap up with 2012, I suppose. And I
Okay.
think this is was this the first year you went to Worlds?
2012 is the year I went to Worlds. Yeah, it was super random though, because at the time I had not played much in terms of big events. And I mean, this is the period where I think the first YCS we got in Europe was in 2010 during X Saber format. I think so. This was
Hmm.
the first time I played a YCS. Was YCS Bochum 2011 or 2010? I don't know exactly what the year was. I definitely know. I know it was X Saber format, which makes me think it was 2010. Um, Before that, we only had the Shonen Jumps and the Pharaoh tours, which I never got to go to because I was very young and my mom didn't let me travel that far and all that kind of stuff. So I didn't actually get to play a premiere event until that time, and I was playing on like a locals level. We would travel to like the maybe Frankfurt sometimes for like bigger tournaments. That was like the extent to what I was playing. And then the older I got, the more I was able to actually play some meta decks, and the more I was able to travel. And then for 2012, we decided to go to the European Championship with a couple of friends of mine, during which was Dino Rabbit, Wind Up, and Insector format, and I guess Chaos Dragons was also part of the. Those were the four big ones, I think.
So I think
Um,
a notable point of this year was that this was the year of YCS Long Beach, which was the biggest
mhm.
event ever at the time, right? And I think up until this year, it was like the biggest event ever for a
I
card
the
game.
biggest one that like yeah, I think so. Yeah, for Yu-Gi-Oh, absolutely. I don't know if other games maybe had like a comparable one, but it was 4,000 something, 4,500 maybe I want to say.
Yeah, and you mentioned those three decks, and historically, people do see it as like, the hand loop, the popular field, or the stun format.
Mhm.
But Dark World was the winner of
Yeah,
YCS Long Beach.
yeah. I have no explanation for that. I didn't have one at the time.
Why? What's wrong with it? Like, is it just
I,
lose
I
to
don't
like
know,
the
dude. Dark
format
World was like
basically?
super wacky. I never thought it was that good. I didn't know at the time. I still don't think it is. Probably just blame Simon He because he lost in the finals. So
Wow,
yeah,
that's crazy to think Simon he was at that.
yeah.
Holy, that's a long time. Shout out to Simon playing Snowman Eater in his deck,
Snowman
by
Eater
the
was
way.
the goat, dude. Every deck played
Yeah,
Snowman Eater.
yeah. So what did this Dark World deck like do? I think that there's like a
I,
deck dev in here. There's like some Mixies.
is
Just
there? There's
pop.
probably skill drain, isn't there?
There's one skill drain,
Yep, it does
none in
that.
the side. I think skill drain is like limited at the time though, or something, right? Is it
Crackdown is
or
pretty busted.
yeah?
Crackdown is pretty infuriating. Like, because they would set their powerful spells, they would only leave the stuff in hand that they wanted to be discarded, and then they
Hmm.
would obviously get to take something powerful out of your hand, and yeah, that was pretty annoying card to deal with. Um, I guess Grapha is a pretty good card, even for like 2011 or 2012 standards. So yeah, it's
12 years ago, you're still playing 3 gates, 3 snow. 2 or 3 Grapha, probably like 2. Even Brawl if you really want to. I think Brawl, like weirdly enough, has like fallen off, right? It's like too slow these days. It's just draw.
Well, yeah, it's not too slow. It's just the fact that you draw a random card is usually worse than searching what you need with snow or something like that. So yeah.
Yeah, or like Rainbow. But yeah, this format is I think somewhat controversial. Like weirdly enough, I do know some people who look back and are like, "Oh no, this was actually a good format." But like I remember a lot of people like looking back and saying, "Oh no, that format was terrible." There was like you got hand looped or you got your entire field popped. What was your thoughts on it?
Well, I liked it, but maybe it's just because I was. It was the first time I was actually successful. Like I got my first YCS top at YCS Leipzig with windups, and I just loved that deck. Because to me, windup is pretty much what I said about Infernity earlier. Like it had that potential to just go crazy on the first turn if you opened like Magician Shark or Tour Guide Shark or something like that, right? But most
Was
of the
the hand
time,
loop consistent?
well,
Like,
not on
were
the
you
first
actually
turn.
playing? Were you actually playing like Yu-Gi-Oh for like most of the duel? Like most of the time
Yeah,
with wind
that's
up?
what I'm getting at. Like, if you opened, it was basically there were a lot of ifs attached. Like, if you opened Magician Shark or if you opened Tour Guide Shark, and your opponent didn't have the Effect Veiler or the Maxi to stop it, or the Didi Crow, which all those cards were being played at the time, then you would win the game on the spot most of the time. But a majority of the times, it was more so that you would have to play some sort of grind game before you got there. Like you would like tour guide into a Zen Mighty to summon a Wind Up Rabbit or something with a Wind Up Factory behind it. Then you would set like trap cards, or you would make a Zen mains, and you'd like trade those kind of resources with your opponent. Your opponent would start playing into it with like Insector cards or Dino Rabbit cards, and also it was a lot of back and forth until you got to do what you were trying to do. And the same is true for Insectors. Like sometimes Insectors would go second, open a hard open Dragonfly plus Hornet, and would just go crazy because you also didn't happen to have an answer, which wasn't that often. The majority of the games, it was like, well, I'm gonna go tour guide into Sangan, and I'm gonna try to get the piece that I'm missing because I didn't open everything. And we're gonna play it out. Like I think if you revisit the format, you're probably gonna find it more interactive than people make it out to be. But maybe that's just me being biased because it's the first time I'm actually seeing success in Yu-Gi-Oh. So
Little
yeah,
caveat about that period as well is like Xyz were, I think, well, I suppose like it was the previous year is when Xyz were released.
Mhm. Yeah.
It's very funny to think that they didn't really have rulings for Xyz materials just yet. So some of you might not be aware, but there was a period in time where if you go tour guide Sangan, detach Sangan, you could trigger it because it
It's a
wasn't.
super short period though. Like that's like in 2011. Like we're already way past that in 2012. Like that
Yeah.
was like more like a thing for the
Mhm.
first couple weeks only, I think.
And I think this is also the period where is it priority gets removed or is that a little
Yes.
later?
That's a big deal during Dino Rabbit wind up so on format is like I think Dino Rabbit is really really dominant for a while, and then I think
Do you want to explain
priority gets
priority
removed.
first for people who might not know what it is?
Yes. So priority is a thing that actually still exists. They didn't completely remove priority, but priority just refers to the turn player having basically dibs on the first action after something has happened. Like when a
Do
chain
not let a
resolves.
judge hear you say that.
Dude,
Technical term
nah, that's
dibs.
the scientific term. It's dibs. And
I'm just imagining the Master Duel glow, right? And you pass priority to where you're like, all right, dibs to you or some shit.
yes.
Like, okay.
So when a chain resolves or when something happens, when a monster is being summoned, the turn player is the first one to do something, right? Like technically, if you have a torrential tribute and your opponent has a torrential tribute and you normal summon a Sangan, uh, you are the first one to be able to activate your things, right? And
Yeah.
at the time, that not only applied to quick effects like trap cards or quick effect monster effects, it also applied to ignition effects, which normally aren't even quick, right? Like something like normal summon Rescue Rabbit, which is you can banish this card to summon two vanillas from the deck. Not a quick effect, nothing like that at all. But at the time, until this point, you could use your turn player priority to immediately use the effect of Rescue Rabbit on summon before your opponent could, for example, torrential it or effect veiler it or something like that, right? Which doesn't really make sense, in my opinion, from today's perspective. I feel like that is something that just intuitively should only be possible with quick effects. So that ability got removed. They didn't completely remove priority, which sometimes people think they did, but you still have the ability to use your priority if you have a quick effect, which is something that is weirdly relevant still. I remember a scenario from literally the most recent YCS Indianapolis. There was a scenario of Raymond Dye playing against Chimera. I forgot the Chimera player's name, unfortunately, but Raymond Dye set a Daruma Karmic Cannon with Arias, and the opponent went normal summon Mirror Sword Knight. And they did not use their turn player priority to quick effect tribute the Mirror Sword Knight, which they could have done because they were the turn player. They can say, I'm going to normal summon Mirror Sword Knight. If the summon is successful, like no Solemn Judgment, I'm the first one to be able to do something. I'm going to quick effect tribute it. Instead, they let Raymond Dye activate the Daruma Karmic Cannon, and then even if you chain the Mirror Sword Knight, if you summon the Burfonet, it gets booked and can't activate. But if you use your turn player priority, Chainlink 1 Mirror Sword Knight obviously can't chain the Daruma to that because there's no monster on the field. So you're going to summon the Burfomet, you're going to activate it, and it's too late for Raymond to do anything with the Karmic Cannon, right? So it's this weird thing where people think priority got removed, but it didn't actually get removed. They only removed some cards or like ignition effects specifically that can't be used with priority anymore, right? So you still have priority, you just can't use ignition effects with priority.
Okay. Yeah, like you said, that's just really silly how like a spell speed 1 effect should work that way, but interesting.
Yeah. So that was a big deal because mainly effect veiler on Dino Rabbit was now possible, right? Like if you summoned Rescue Rabbit, it could get veilered, and that made veiler in general a lot better, and it made Dino Rabbit weaker. I never liked Dino Rabbit. I'm kind of noticing that now that we're talking about these formats, I hated a lot of these decks that were forced to play vanillas, like Agents or Rescue Rabbit decks. I just didn't want to deal with that. It's carried over till today. I always hated decks that had to play Garnet for Brilliant Fusion. I hated decks that have to play Gamma or Driver. I hate to be forced to play those cards. And that was already a thing back in the day. So I always preferred Wind Up. That was kind of my thing at that time. But yeah, it's people definitely preferred Rabbit overall, I think, at that time, which I still don't like it, but
so I think it's at the end of 2012 / beginning of 2013 before Rulers is when we have this first iteration of Fire Water format, correct?
I don't think so.
I'm looking at a Bochum 2013 list here.
That should be Bochum 2013 should be Mermail.
And there's a YCS Miami that has a Mermail list in top 8. Yeah, there's Mermail and Fire Fist here.
Oh, right. Yeah. I guess it's not quite yet. I don't know if people consider this one Fire Water yet because it still has like Wind Up with Shock Lock and all that. But yeah, this is the release of Mermail at first, and then also Fire Fist. Yes, they come out there. I don't know if this is the one that people refer to when they say Fire Water, but technically they do exist. Yeah.
Mono Mermail or something is what it was called, right?
Mono Mermail is like the second iteration of Mermail, I want to say, because initially when it came out, that was the first time I actually played a vanilla because it was the Genix Undyne and Genix controller package that people would use, and it was more like a pure Atlantean deck. With like Dragoons, and it would only use like a minimal amount of Mermail cards. It was like Megalo, Lind, Pike, and then obviously Abyss Sphere, and that was used to facilitate like Mulling Glacia, maybe even Deep Sea Diva into like a Marksman to summon a Synchro, and all that kind of stuff. But then Mono Mermail was like that was the time where I started to really love Mermail because Mono Mermail is such a dope deck. Like shoutouts to I think it was Billy Brake and Jeff Jones came up with that. Like Mono Mermail is phenomenal. Well,
yeah. So the last YCS of 2012 looks to be just about getting into that Fire Fist with some Mermail decks, but it does look like predominantly wind
What's
ups. So
the last YCS of 2012? Was that Barcelona?
well, according to Format Library here, it's giving me 2013
Yeah, because
events when
I
I
remember
look at 2012.
2012 YCS Barcelona was in December. I remember that, and I I played Mermail at that, having picked up the cards on the Friday. Like I had to buy 3 Spanish structure decks to be able to play the Atlanteans at that tournament because I switched kind of last minute. I don't know what I was going to play, but I learned about the new cards like barely before the YCS, and I had to pick up the structure decks at the venue in Spanish. It was pretty cool. And I think Jack Brune won that one with Macro Rabbit. So I think at that time there was the Mermails hadn't quite caught on yet. Like I did make top 32 with it, but I don't remember playing against many other Mermail decks, like maybe 2 or 3. Like it wasn't a super big deal as it was about to become in 2013. Yeah.
All right. Well, this has been, I suppose, part one of our
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
chronology of Yu-Gi-Oh. We'll probably put this part up, and then immediately part two, and then if you're listening to this, make sure you follow us on the various forms of social media because we are going to be doing a couple of other episodes that are going to coming up directly after this one.
Yes.
So, like for those of you who are here now live, we're gonna have Syriax with us at some point on Monday, and then we will most likely do a Battles of Legend info pre WCQ season, potentially post Nationals roundup of sorts, just to cover the meta game a little bit. Hopefully, we'll get some kind of a shake up here. But yeah, part two, there's a lot more to talk about, and I will be a lot more informative because this is when I started playing. Was the baby rule? Well, actually, Ravine Ruler is kind of when we started here, but that's
Modern
literally like the
Yu-Gi-Oh, am I
halfway
right?
point. What would you call this? I think like just if you were to like modern is just like a word, right? But I think like definitely if you were to categorize this, what you would go like beginning of Yu-Gi-Oh up to like Go is like Duel Monsters.
See,
And then
I'm missing the exact terms, but I would say everything until 2006 I would classify as like old Yu-Gi-Oh, like I don't know, OG, whatever, the very first ones. 2007 until like Synchros come out is like where it starts picking up some pace. I don't know what the word for that would be. But like to me that's like one of the more nostalgic periods, and then when Synchros come out like 2009, 10, 11, 12, to me is like
this graphic that you reacted to and
yeah,
uploaded on your alt channel is unironically a good a
it was
decent
not bad.
description. Is
Yeah, it was not bad.
Shoutouts to La Prince here, but yeah, beginning of Yu-Gi-Oh to like 2008-ish, I guess you're looking at like just OG Yu-Gi-Oh, I guess, and then you've got
Yeah.
like Synchros 2008 to like 2012, 13, and then after that from Dragon Rulers onwards up until like the Master 4 for
Yeah.
4 years. I think I would probably call that like new Yu-Gi-Oh per se.
Mm-hmm.
2017 onwards up till COVID, maybe that's when you could use the word modern for Master 4. And then that 2020 period is like crazy. Like that's like the postmodern-ish or whatever you want to call
The
it. And then
Dark
like
Ages.
yeah, that was rough. And then Power of the Elements, I think onwards is like yeah, you have to maybe just create a separate term for that, the nuclear age of
We
Yu-Gi-Oh
are
or something.
in postmodern right now, guys. It's postmodern, and the next format is we're going to call in 2 years we're going to call the current format the future. We're going to refer to the current format as future Yu-Gi-Oh.
I can't wait till like another 10 years from now where we're gonna refer to tier elements as like old school. That's gonna be fun.
Future 2.
But yeah, I think my biggest takeaway is just like the fact that we can talk so long and this much and still not even scratch the surface of any of these formats is
Unironically,
ridiculous.
we could have had an entire episode about like Edison format and what
Or
we
just
like
every
about it
year,
and what we
yeah.
don't like about it, or like all of these. So yeah, I was afraid it was gonna be too long, but I guess putting it into 2 parts is kind of the perfect solution for this. So if you've enjoyed this, yeah, thanks for listening. And there's going to be a part 2 where we do the second half.
Yeah. Hopefully, something can be done to like really revive like these old formats, and the dual trial that had Go. There's also a new dual trial coming out for 2010, although it's like OCG, so it's a little bit different. Really
is it?
can't wait for that.
That's nice. I mean, I
Yeah,
honestly, I kind of want to just make an effort because, like, you could do these. You don't have to wait for a Master Duel event to showcase
Mhm.
some of these formats. I feel like I want to just maybe take the time at some point to just sit down
Potentially, yeah.
and visit these again, like with like made up, like you have to go into duel rooms and just tell people, hey, you have to pass your turn if I win the coin flip or anything like that, you know. But with some
They're so close
workarounds,
to just implementing it for us, you know. That's the thing,
yeah.
right? Like,
Yeah, but like I'm not gonna wait for them to do it. I think for every single format, I'm probably gonna revisit some of these at some point on stream to just play and see how they would feel.
all right, lots of topics and discussions incoming. Subscribe as always to our social medias, to the Wet, to the Heart of the Cast YouTube channel as well, to make sure you support it there. Follow on the Spotify and the Apple Podcasts as well. Keep up to date. We'll see you guys soon for some more TCG, all related Yu-Gi-Oh content. Peace out, and see you in the next one.
Bye bye.